Sometimes I don't know if the internet has made young people's lives better or worse. Originally, it was something that could be slowly digested on my own, but it has been made out to be as if the sky is falling, and there is no resilience at all. In May, my daughter Xiaoshuang called me from school and said she was depressed, couldn't sleep, and just lay in bed doing nothing. I couldn't help but make her laugh. Xiaoshuang is my daughter from high school. If anyone is depressed, it should be me first. Last year, when Xiaoshuang took her midterm exams, her grades plummeted. She was 20 points below the cutoff for a top-tier school. I couldn't just let her continue in a regular high school. I spent a lot of money to enroll her in a private high school. And what did she tell me? She said she was depressed and didn't want to study. Kids these days, it's like they learn a couple of new words online and use them as excuses not to study. I told her, Xiaoshuang, you want mom to understand you, and mom also wants you to understand me. I don't expect you to set an example for your little brother, but at the very least, don't waste all the effort mom put into you. Xiaoshuang said, okay, stop moralizing. I've had enough. Whether you want to spend money is your business, and it has nothing to do with me. I almost shouted, Xiaoshuang, you've gone too far. But Xiaoshuang quickly hung up, not giving me a chance to get angry. Our family is in a small county in Shuyuan, Hubei. For Xiaoshuang, her upbringing, while not wealthy, is well described as having no worries about food and clothing and being doubly cherished. I gave birth to Xiaoshuang in 2007. She was my first child, the apple of my eye. I left my job to be a full-time mom for over a year to take care of her. When she was almost 2, we sent her to her maternal grandfather's house to help take care of her. Xiaoshuang was the first grandchild in our family. My father doted on her, couldn't bear to scold her or hit her. My stepmother, although our relationship was SOSO, found no fault with Xiaoshuang. As for my 2 younger brothers, whether it was the elder one, born to my biological mother, or the younger one, born to my stepmother, they had deep affection for Xiaoshuang. From a young age, they treated her like a princess, giving her action figures, toys, clothes, whatever she wanted. In 2018, I had a second child, a son. At the time, I was afraid that Xiaoshuang might have thoughts about me neglecting her. I was especially attentive to her, always concerned about everything. And Xiaoshuang was very close to her little brother. After all, I had 2 younger brothers with whom I had a close relationship, and she didn't mind having one more playmate at home. I often think that if I had grown up in these conditions, my life would have been a completely different story. I really don't understand why Xiaoshuang can be so unappreciative. Actually, young Xiaoshuang wasn't like this. She was innocent, lively, obedient, and cute. But the more radiant her childhood was, the less I could accept her as she is now. Who could have imagined that one day she would slap me in the face? When she hit me, I was completely stunned. Xiaoshuang's transformation probably started in junior high. In the first half of her first year, her grades plummeted rapidly. From being near the top before school started, she fell to average. I was anxious at the time and asked her what was going on. She said she didn't understand the lessons in class. I immediately arranged for her to have extra tutoring and found teachers to help her. But her monthly test scores were inconsistent, with no improvement. I thought, is she in a romantic relationship? But privately, I asked teachers and her friends about the situation. They all said they hadn't noticed Xiaoshuang getting close to any boy. She just didn't seem to have any energy for anything. A couple of days later, Xiaoshuang came back to me and said, "Why are you spreading rumors about me at school?" I replied, puzzled, "What rumors have I spread?" She retorted, "Why did you say I'm in love with someone? Can't you just ask me? You don't feel embarrassed, but I do." Her accusation ignited my anger, and I shouted at her, "If you were willing to tell me, would I need to ask someone else? Look at your grades. Do you have the right to yell at me?" Xiaoshuang pointed at me and said, "Fine, I'll tell you. It's all because of you. You're constantly trying to control me, forcing me to do this and that. I've had enough." I slapped her hand away and said, "Try pointing at me again. I'm your mother. I've spoiled you, and you don't even know how good you have it." Tears welled up in Xiaoshuang's eyes. That might have been the first time I had ever laid a hand on her. Once domestic violence starts, whether between spouses or mothers and daughters, it's challenging to stop. I remember to this day the year-end report card that year. When I saw her grades, I was furious. Apart from Chinese, which was built on her previous foundation, her scores in other subjects were shockingly low. That evening, I tried to have a heart-to-heart conversation with Xiaoshuang, asking her what was going on. At first, Xiaoshuang didn't say anything. But when I pressed her, she suddenly snapped and said, "You're so annoying. Can't you just leave me alone? I don't want to go to school, it's pointless. My dad only finished primary school, and he's doing fine. We won't starve." I asked her, "What's gotten into you?" She retorted, "Wasn't it you who forced me to talk? Weren't you the one who wanted to know? I don't talk, and you get upset. If I do, you get angry. What do you want me to do?" She stared at me, her neck stiff, as if I were her lifelong enemy. I became furious, and I raised my hand and gave her a slap. Without hesitation, Xiaoshuang slapped me back. That slap made me cry. This was my daughter, whom I had loved for over a decade. What had I done that she would strike me? And she had the audacity to claim that I had forced her into it. She was truly pushing me to the brink of insanity. That day, her father was sitting next to us. We had a heated family dispute, and we tried to educate Xiaoshuang. From that moment on, a wall had been built between Xiaoshuang and me, or rather, between Xiaoshuang and our family. We had moments of reconciliation, but we could never find the same close mother-daughter relationship we had before. One night, I dreamt of the young Xiaoshuang, who was hugging and kissing me, begging me not to go to work and to stay home with her. When I woke up in the morning, I found my pillow wet from tears. I thought, there can't be many mothers in the world who can endure their own daughter hating them. In an instant, I thought of my own mother. She divorced my father, took my younger brother, and left me behind. Because of that, I had resented her for many years. She must have been suffering too. Xiaoshuang fought against me for 3 years during her junior high years. As my younger son grew, becoming increasingly adorable, Xiaoshuang's unreasonable behavior became more apparent. But could I give up on her? I couldn't. I discussed with her father and decided to spend whatever it took to send her to a good school. We couldn't let her go to waste. The school had a semi-closed management system, and she came home once a week. But her absence from home didn't bring any peace of mind. On the weekend when Xiaoshuang called home, to ease the tension, I took her shopping for clothes. She liked a particular dress, but she wanted it in black. I suggested red, saying it looked more vibrant, while black made you look older. I thought young people should wear something colorful. That set her off, and she accused me of PUA. At times, I'm grateful that I keep up with all the new terms online. I told her, "Could you stop throwing around new words to label everything? Giving you advice is also called PUA? Are you crazy?" We had an argument on the street, and in the end, I left her there and went home by myself. When she returned home, our argument continued. She cried and accused me of not caring about her life or death and blamed me for forcing her to the brink of depression, intentionally pretending to be ill to torture her. I said, "If you want to die, go ahead. I'll let you suffer for a few more days, but if you die, it's me who'll suffer." She didn't say a word, just stared at me motionless. We locked eyes for a long time. Then suddenly, she turned around and went back to her room. Later, Xiaoshuang told me, "I was thinking, I told my mom I was depressed, so why did she tell me to go die? I wasn't sure if you were serious or just angry, so I went back to my room. Otherwise, I might have gone to the balcony." Listening to this, I was filled with fear and regret. It was from that moment that I began to believe that Xiaoshuang was genuinely struggling with depression. Whenever she came home, she'd silently lie in bed and do nothing. In the second week, when Xiaoshuang came home again, I took her to a top-tier hospital in the city to see a psychologist. Xiaoshuang was diagnosed with mild depression. After getting the prescription and returning home, my husband and I were both bewildered. We thought we hadn't done anything excessive to Xiaoshuang, so how had she ended up where she was now? After Xiaoshuang went back to school, I went to see the psychologist again. Initially, I wanted to discuss Xiaoshuang's condition, but our conversation eventually turned to me. The doctor said, "Children are like mirrors of their parents, but some parents are unwilling to see what's reflected in their children." I asked, "What did I see?" Ironically, I had taken my daughter to the doctor, but that week, I ended up seeing myself. The doctor was right. My life now was too comfortable, masking the wounds and scars of the past. Yet, everyone's personality is shaped by their history. Even if you seem to forget, you no longer recall, it still permeates your life in subtle, imperceptible ways. My dad loves my children, especially Xiaoshuang. Because he used to be a bad man and an inadequate father. His current kindness and affection for Xiaoshuang conceal his violent past. We used to live in a rural village near the county town. Back then, it was rare for girls in the village to receive an education, but my mom had graduated from high school, making her as exceptional as a student from a prestigious university today. She could calculate, had beautiful handwriting, and was an eloquent speaker. Initially, she was the youngest teacher in our village, and later, she became a women's cadres in the village. But at that time, the rural areas demanded having a son. After my mom gave birth to me in 1980, she reluctantly had my younger brother in 1983, to meet the traditional expectation of having a male heir. However, this choice derailed her own promising future. In theory, my outstanding mother should have been cherished by my dad. But he didn't. My dad was the eldest in my grandmother's family, and he had experienced turbulent times. He had to fight to protect his family through those challenging years, leaving him with a rough personality. During their marriage, he resorted to physical abuse when things didn't go his way. My mom, despite being highly educated, was unable to cope with this brute of a man. Now, many people might not understand this. My dad had an excellent reputation in the village, known for his sense of justice, hard work, and filial piety. As for wife beating, it wasn't considered a stain, it was seen as a sign of a man's masculinity. So, my mom endured many years under my dad's masculinity. When I was in the second grade of primary school, one day, I was doing my homework with my classmates on the school playground. There was a gentle and beautiful girl who walked over, calling out to me, "Hey, are you dirty? You're writing your homework on the desk." A group of kids were all amazed by her beauty. Proudly, I introduced this beautiful lady, saying, "This is my aunt." My maternal family had 6 children. At that time, both of my uncles were married and had started having children. My aunt had no place to stay, so she moved in with us. After all, my dad was a righteous man, right? However, it didn't take long for my mom to endure more beatings. I was young at the time and didn't understand why my dad suddenly became so fed up with my mom. It wasn't until I overheard some gossip from the neighbors that I began to get a clue. My aunt, who was just 20 years old, had started a romantic relationship with my dad. Yes, my current stepmother is my aunt. That was in 1988. And for women in rural areas, divorce was out of the question. My mom endured domestic violence and betrayal from her own family, yet she dared not leave. My younger brother was still a child and was often left at my grandmother's house. When my dad was at home, beating my mom, it was 8-year-old me who had to protect her. Sometimes, my mom would become desperate and hit her own head or slap her own face. I would hold my mom and cry, begging her not to harm herself. Eventually, I said to my mom, "Mom, please get a divorce." Yes, most children don't want their parents to divorce, but I did. Because their divorce would save my mom. I wouldn't have to feel my heart race in fear every time my dad came home, and I wouldn't have to knock on the neighbor's door in the middle of the night, asking them to stop my dad from beating my mom. I said to my mom, "Mom, get a divorce. Don't worry, I'll go with you, and I'll change my last name to yours. No matter how we live, it's better than enduring the beatings." My mom held me and wept bitterly. She said, all right, I'll get a divorce." It was the early winter of 1990. My mom finally made up her mind to get a divorce. I'll never forget that morning, on the 26th day of the lunar calendar, when it was bitterly cold. I was sleeping soundly in bed, and suddenly, I felt a little, cold hand gently touching my face. It was my younger brother. He said, "Sister, I want to go to Grandma's house for the new year with Mom." At the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought he'd be back after the new year. We could still play together every day, just like when we were kids. Little did I know that this parting would last for many years. My mom and dad divorced through the court. Later, my dad showed me the court judgment. It was my encouragement that led my mom to get a divorce, but she took my younger brother with her. The court judgment explicitly stated that I would stay with my dad, and it broke my heart. My dad said, "Didn't you want to use your mom's last name? Well, she doesn't want you." To be honest, my dad was furious for years because I wanted to take my mom's last name. Later, my mom came back to pick up some things. I asked her, "Why didn't you take me with you?" She touched my head and said, "Your younger brother is too young, and I'm worried about him. You're older and more sensible." My tears streamed down uncontrollably, and I said, "Mom, is a 10-year-old already considered an adult? Isn't it 18 when you're officially grown up?" My mom couldn't continue the conversation and walked away. I still remember that scene vividly, as if it were a movie. In middle school, when my teacher discussed Zhu Ziqing's Beiying, my father's back, the image that came to my mind was of my mom leaving. That tiny figure, shivering slightly, disappeared into the misty haze. That back, after just 1 year, remarried. Some women who intrude into others' marriages always think they're an exception to the rule. However, in reality, nature is hard to change. How a man treats his ex-wife is how he'll treat you one day. No one is exempt from that. Moreover, my aunt had to face the complete rejection of her family. My dad was a habitual abuser. Would he spare her? To be honest, I don't hold much grudge against her. Unlike my mom, she was educated and capable. She even fought a legal battle for the divorce, taking away 2/3 of my dad's property and all the household appliances. My aunt hadn't even finished elementary school. She was just 20 years old and unmarried. Her own family considered her superfluous and sent her away. My dad's sense of righteousness became a life-saving straw for her, one she clung to desperately. Unfortunately, when she married into my family, the era had already begun to change. My dad's old-fashioned and rough manner was gradually being phased out. Our family's income took a nosedive. My dad vented all his frustration on her. Soon, her face lost its smile, and she stopped being playful. Poverty, domestic violence, and the responsibility of taking care of 2 children. Her once beautiful face prematurely aged. For a period, my dad worked away from home for most of the year. My aunt, at home, was far from warm and friendly. She hardly spoke to me, whether I was happy, sick, or sad. She always wore a slight frown and a cold expression, conveying a sense of being unwanted, a burden. The most vivacious years of my life were spent under her cold and silent tyranny. Her coldness only made me want to escape. When I shared this with my therapist, I suddenly understood what he meant. If Xiaoxue is my mirror, looking at myself in it, I could see traces of my dad's violence and my aunt's indifference. And my longing for my mom that couldn't be fulfilled. Due to our family's financial difficulties, I had to finish junior high and start working. I had always thought of myself as intelligent and capable. Yet I remained trapped in this small town. In 2006, I married a man who loves me very much, and we live a peaceful and comfortable life. I have a car and a house in the city now, and we have 2 children. My husband is loving, diligent, and considerate. There's only one regret in my heart: I didn't have the opportunity to go to college. I missed out on a different life. And I unconsciously imposed this regret on my daughter. Whenever her grades slipped even slightly, I'd become anxious. Under the pretext of caring, I'd exert pressure. The therapist said, "You see, you're quite aware of your issues, aren't you? You know where your problems lie. Do you know that your daughter experienced bullying at school but didn't dare to tell you?" I was shocked and asked, "Who bullied Xiaoxue?" The therapist replied, "I think you need to have an honest conversation with your daughter and tell her what you've just told me. She needs to understand your past to reconcile with her future." It was on Children's Day that I had a conversation with Xiaoxue. We talked openly and honestly for a long time. She told me that she didn't want to give up on herself, but she felt that I was constantly setting unattainable goals for her. She felt manipulated by me, and whenever she didn't follow my instructions, I would get very angry. She even showed me a photo of the girl who bullied her, and it turned out they were classmates in junior high. It all began because, at the start of the school year, I had said something like, "You used to be classmates, so be nice to her." She interpreted it as me helping others but not her. I said, "You may have misunderstood me, Xiaoxue. There are things I just didn't express well." Afterward, I shared my life story with her. Xiaoxue is such a kind-hearted child. She listened while tears welled up in her eyes. She said, "Mom, I had no idea you've been through so much, and I didn't know how bad Grandpa and the others were." Yes, it's precisely because time changes every person that I didn't want to talk about the past. My dad feels deeply guilty toward me, which is why he dotes on my daughter like he does. He has become a better person, but I inherited his temper and ended up hurting my daughter. That day, I told Xiaoxue that for a long time, I resented my mom. I had encouraged her to get a divorce, but she went off to start a new life and chose my younger brother, not me. Once, my mom came to visit me. I was working in the field, squatting down. She called me from the edge of the field, waving for me to come over. When I saw her, I picked up my basket and turned to run away. I heard her crying behind me, begging me to come back. But I cried and forced myself not to turn around. Xiaoxue said, "Grandma did wrong." But I shook my head. 3 years later, I met my second aunt. She told me that life is tough for single rural women, and they're likely to remarry. When I was little, my mom couldn't tell me this directly. In reality, she was afraid of marrying the wrong man and harming me. Mothers always take one step for their children and look 10 steps ahead. Sometimes, what you thought was bad when you were young, you realize later on was an act of love. I told Xiaoxue, I've forgiven everyone, but I can't forgive your grandma. Because she's the most important person in my heart, and I thought she had betrayed me. But in reality, everyone has hurt me, and she's the one who protected me. I told her this today because I want you to know that I feel the same way about you. I just think it would be great if you, like your grandma, could be a knowledgeable woman who doesn't lose out in a divorce. I don't want you to grow up and realize you've misunderstood your mom for so many years, just like I did. Xiaoxue threw herself into my arms and burst into tears. She said, Mom, I'm sorry. Suddenly, I felt like I had fallen back into that dream, and my beloved daughter was back in my embrace. I held her tightly, crying uncontrollably. But, actually, it's me who should apologize. My therapist reminded me that if I were not doing well now, I would reflect on the influence of my family of origin. But my current comfortable and prosperous life has quietly covered up the remnants of the past generation. Xiaoxue made me realize that I am a person with strong control tendencies. Deep down in my subconscious, I still fear losing and long for stability. I don't allow anyone to deviate from my pace. Whether it's my husband or my 2 younger brothers, they comply with me willingly. They're willing to listen to me and let me take control. But Xiaoxue is different. She's in a crucial period of forming her own identity. What she needs is respect, not submission to my authority. I said, Xiaoxue, Mom has also made mistakes. From now on, Mom will listen to your thoughts more, and we'll discuss things together, okay? In reality, during this time, we have become much more harmonious. I'm not sure if our relationship will change for the better in the future, but the only thing I'm sure of is that I need to change. My family of origin has left its mark on me. I can't pass on this kind of harm to my daughter.